Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. This is Taza, a knowledge series brought to you by Cup of Excellence and Alliance for Coffee Excellence. We have an excellent webinar today on catalyzing peace and prosperity with Qima and Lavazza and Alliance for Coffee Excellence and Dr. Christophe Montagnon. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to the Alliance for Coffee Excellence, Cup of Excellence Executive Director, Darren Daniel, who will be moderating this presentation.
Great, thanks, Anna. Thank you to all of our presenters today. My name is Darren Daniel. I'm the Executive Director for the Alliance for Coffee Excellence and Cup of Excellence. And we're really delighted to have our panelists here today to talk a little bit about the work that Qima Foundation is doing along with Lavazza Foundation, and also working directly with Dr. Montagnon from RD2 and some of the genetic work and DNA work and nursery work. So we've been very fortunate to work on the private collection auctions with Faris Shaibani, the CEO and founder of Qima and Qima Foundation. And it's been a very exciting 4 years. We're in our fourth year with the competition and auction. We began in 2019 prior to COVID and had our first jury actually in person in Portland, Oregon, and worked very closely with Qima on the very first auction for what then has become the Best of Yemen. And so again, we will be launching this year, but today we really wanted to focus on some of the research and impact work that has been developed over the last, I think, 2 to 3 years on this project. And we do have Faris Shaibani here, as well as Dr. Montagnon to kind of kick this off with a presentation regarding the work that they've done. And I also want to thank Veronica Rossi from Lavazza Foundation for being here today to share with us as well. So I think what I'd like to do is have Faris and Christophe begin with your presentations. And again, thank you all for being here. And we will have questions at the end of this presentation from the audience, and we'll be fielding those questions as we go. And other than that, Faris and Christophe, would you like to start?
Yeah, hi all. Thanks very much, Darren. First of all, very happy to be here, excited to be part of this conversation. Grateful for Ace and everyone on the call here, Dr. Christophe, Veronica for joining us, and grateful for everyone on the call for taking time out of their busy schedules to join. I'm Faris Shaibani. I am the CEO and founder of Qima Coffee, and I'm a trustee on the Qima Foundation. For over the next 1 or 2 hours or so, we'll be taking you through the work that we've been doing in Yemen, the valuable development work that we've been doing in Yemen, and hopefully you'll walk away with an awareness of what we're doing, first of all, but also the impact of coffee on lives and livelihoods, and in this regard, peace and prosperity in a country like Yemen. So I'll begin with the presentation. So we can get started with the details. So this is the project title, Prosperity Through Coffee for Smallholder Farmers in Central Yemen. And this fits nicely with our theme this year for the auction, which is peace and prosperity. This project was put together 2 years ago. It was launched 2 years ago, really with the aim of facilitating prosperity through coffee in Yemen. And as the title suggests, and as the people on this call would indicate, this was a partnership between the Qima Foundation and the Lavazza Foundation in collaboration with RD2 Vision, Dr. Christophe Montagnon, and Qima Coffee, the green coffee sourcing and trading organization. So most of you have probably heard of Qima Coffee. For many, Qima Foundation might be new. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe you've heard about it, but not so, haven't been so much in the public sphere. What is the difference between the two? Qima Coffee is a for-profit social enterprise, for-profit business. It specializes in working with smallholder farmers to source, process, export, import, and trade green coffee. And we operate globally. We operate out of the UK, where I'm calling from today, of course, Yemen, Colombia, Ecuador, more recently, and then also in the market, China, Korea, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia. And what's the value? Why does Qima Coffee exist? It exists because it believes that through coffee trade, you can enable sustainable livelihoods for coffee farmers. What's my role in there? I'm the CEO and founder. I established it 6 years ago. and I run that organization. Let's come to the Qima Foundation. It's a non-for-profit charity. It was incorporated both in Yemen and the UK as a charitable incorporated organization, a CIO. It's based out of Yemen and the UK, soon to be Colombia, and its focus is on broader grassroots rural community development, broader, not just coffee, and it really focuses on social development projects. My role in there, I am one of 4 trustees in the foundation. I don't actively run the foundation, but I do have a role in directing it to ensure that it's in line with its vision, mission, and values. A little bit about the foundation. We focus on 3 pillars, which we consider to be the pillars of a rural community, a sustainable rural community, sustainable agriculture. So things like irrigation, fertilization, productivity, yield for crops in general, gender justice, really driving a more balanced and equitable gender value chain, again, not just in coffee, in the crops, in the rural community in general, and then education, because without an education, there is no tomorrow. Why the foundation? Some people sometimes ask, well, there are lots of charities and NGOs in Yemen. Is this another NGO? Is there a need for it really? Why did we set it up in the first place? So I set up Qima Coffee in 2016. 2 years later, we set up the Qima Foundation. And I did it because I found very quickly that Yemen was in dire need of development projects. 90, it depends which number you look for, but 90 to 98% plus of the aid money that goes into Yemen is directed at emergency humanitarian assistance, which is of course absolutely critical, but there's not much, or in fact almost nothing, that goes into development projects, sustainable development projects. And in a climate like today, that we're seeing fatigue in the funding community, we're seeing also other crises around the world, Ukraine and so on and so forth, that are of course putting a pressure on the availability of funds. In these type of scenarios, you really start to understand that there is a need for sustainable projects in countries like Yemen, because what happens when the money runs out? But also, you don't also want to be forever reliant on aid money. Number 2, there is an opportunity to achieve high impact per dollar. I think what we've managed to achieve with Qima Coffee is efficiency of impact. With a little, we do a lot. And I think that's the very same ethos and philosophy we want to do with Qima Foundation. With a little, we want to do a lot. And hopefully you'll see today that the size of the project, what the project achieved compared to what went in it, which of course was a great amount of energy and resources, but the ratio of these two was great. And then thirdly, and I guess unfortunately, but perhaps that's where the opportunity exists, there is unfortunately widespread corruption and fund mismanagement in Yemen. That's kind of linked to why there is a low impact per dollar, but it's a bit more sinister than that. And that was something that really disturbed me at a very deep level in Yemen, to have people who are starving on a day-to-day basis and see corruption and the misuse of funds in that climate and environment. So what we hope to do with the Qima Foundation, and what we look to do with the Qima Foundation, is of course appropriate the use of funds in a way that's transparent, ethical, and impactful. Okay, let's jump into the presentation. So this is, so that everyone kind of follows us through the narrative and the discussion. The first thing is I'll introduce the project, what it was about, what it aimed to do. Then we'll talk about the National Coffee Survey and the important data that came out of it. Then the model farm and scalable reservoir was really one of the pillars. The processing center of excellence, how we add value through the value chain through processing. The driving female inclusion, there was an important female component to this project. The largest production nursery in Yemen. And then Dr. Christoph will step in to talk about how R&D and innovation really led this project, and how this project was driven by an ethos and a philosophy of R&D and innovation. And then I'll close off with the impact and results. What did we actually achieve beyond the slides? What did we actually do on the ground? And then I'll give you a little bit of an idea of the challenges that we face, and there's only so much we can give in a slide, in a deck, but just so people understand how difficult it is to do the projects that are done. And then finally, I'll wrap up with what we're looking to do next, and hopefully try to get people behind the next phase of the project. So jumping into the project itself. So we established it, we started it, commissioned it two years ago with the Lavazza Foundation, and really it's Yemen's first specialty coffee development project. And it focused on supply chain development, agronomic debottlenecking, and female inclusion, as I've alluded to. Total project cost was about $390,000. Most of that was contributed generously and kindly by the Lavazza Foundation, and another part of it was contributed by Qima Coffee. Wrong way. What were the goals? And here we're framing the goals in a way that's understandable and organized. There are three primary drivers to this project. Number one, knowledge in farm management, right? How to have conversations and exchange knowledge with farmers. And I do say exchange knowledge with farmers because there's a lot to learn also, and how to work together towards improving farm management. Number two, how to enable a premium market access for Yemen's coffee farming community. And number three, how to drive a more female inclusive value chain in Yemen's coffee industry. Let's start with the survey. Now, here's an interesting thing. Since starting in Yemeni coffee, I've heard, 10 more viewpoints than I can count on what is needed for Yemen's coffee industry. Everyone has a different viewpoint. And unfortunately, almost none of those, I would go out on a limb and say none of those are really driven by real validated data. So the first problem that we face in Yemen was a lack of data. There are lots of opinions, but no real data to drive and underpin those opinions with. And so when you're looking to solve a problem, if you don't know what the problem is, I mean, you're not really going to do anything, or maybe you'll do something that's not needed. So we started with data, and the data in the context of the project was a national coffee survey. So it was the largest national coffee survey of coffee growing households in Yemen. We had 148 households surveyed. There were 1,600-ish people covered. So it was valid, it was representative, it covered most of Yemen's coffee growing regions. And the data was fascinating. What was the data? Number one, great news. Coffee can be prosperous, right? We're talking about peace and prosperity. Coffee can be a vehicle for prosperity. Why do we say this? Well, if you look at the Yemen's coffee growing households, coffee still represents about 50% of cash crop incomes. 50%. So it's significant. It still plays a significant role as a cash generator for Yemen's coffee household. Number two, it's profitable, right? It's profitable. It has an 85% profit margin. So it's good. So it's great, right? Is there an issue? Yes, there is. The production is very, very limited. If we look at the average number of people per household, it's quite large in Yemen, 10.7 average. If you look at the average number of trees per household, it's 512. So you have a lot of people relying on a small number of coffee trees. And therein lies the problem that even though they are profitable, right, they contribute quite well to from an income perspective, because of the size of the household and the small size of the farm, you have an average net income per person of $169. So it's per person per year, right? So let me rephrase that. Each person has $169 to feed them, right? At least from coffee income, which represents 50% of the total income over a year. So despite that, despite the profitability, coffee farmers are still below the poverty line in Yemen. And there is a serious constraint, an agronomic constraint, let's say. Water, no surprise, right? Yemen is the driest coffee growing origin in the world. So 93% of farmers rely on irrigation for coffee growing, this is through the survey, and 79% considered it a major primary limitation. And fertilizer, right? The building blocks of farming. So in Yemen, there's a problem with chemical fertilizers. You can't have them; they're officially banned, and so you have to rely on manure. And what we found interesting in the survey was that households that have cows that produce manure generated 15% higher net incomes per coffee tree, right? So having a cow improves coffee profitability. Interesting, maybe something that we wouldn't have known, but it's limited. Organic matter is in high demand, and Christoph will talk more about that in his section about the dynamics in a household between cows, really between cattle and coffee growing and profitability and household dynamics. And Christoph will address that in more details. And another good news is, so there is land to be planted. So I said that it's profitable, but there's not much of it, right? But the good news is there is land that can be planted to increase coffee production. 65% of farmers said they have fallow land available, and the average land available was 0.33 hectares average. You can see the breakdown per region on the graph on the right, and that can generate an additional $1,000 per year of income. That's almost double, just under, almost double the household income through the planting of the land that's available to be planted. It just needs some say investment for it to be planted in the shape of terraced. The land needs to have terraces built, and then planting material, of course, and holding. So summary: coffee can be prosperous. There are constraints in terms of water and fertilizer. Farmers in Yemen need to plant more, to grow more coffee, because production is limited, and there is room for that. There is potential for that. Let's jump into the next component, which is the model farm, because on the back of the data, we could then start having some interesting interventions that were valid and relevant for farmers. So the first thing is the model farm and the reservoir. Why do we need a model farm in Yemen? Well, we are trying to develop. We've noticed through the survey that there are some mitigations. There are some constraints, that farmers face, and that mitigations are needed for those constraints. So what better way to do that than to build a model farm and use that model farm as a way to help farmers debottleneck those constraints. So the model farm represents really a place where the Qima Foundation can implement practices, experiments, without asking farmers to take the risk, without asking farmers to experiment on our behalf, so that we develop practical, useful, tangible, impactful mitigations for farmers. What does the model farm look like? Well, we established it recently, 2,100 plantlets planted, 10 varieties planted in total. And we identified one of the most interesting things from the model farm. We identified something that we would never have identified had we not actually gone through the practice, the steps of setting up a farm, really an experience of a coffee farmer, which was that holing. What do I mean by holing? Digging a hole for a seedling was actually a major constraint. So whilst we might be very happy in giving seedlings to farmers, for example, we would never have thought that the problem the farmer would be thinking about is, how on earth do I plant this seedling now? How on earth do I plant it in my farm? And that turned out to be a major constraint, and something that people might be raising their eyebrows at. Well, how difficult can it be to plant a seedling? And again, Dr. Christoph will talk about the challenge in planting, in holing in Yemen, and what we've done to debottleneck that. Reservoir, we established what we call a scalable model reservoir. Why is that important? Why do we need the reservoir, and how is it scalable? Well, I said in the survey results that actually 93% of farmers relied on irrigation. So irrigation is important in Yemen. What do farmers do in Yemen? They build these reservoirs to catch rainwater, and then this rainwater is used to irrigate their farms, right, throughout the seasons. So the problem here is that the reservoirs tend to be really expensive, are typically built by INGOs, and tend to be really expensive. So expensive that they are far, 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 far out of the reach of a farmer, out of the reach of a smallholder farmer. They cannot afford to build them themselves. So what we wanted to do was, well, how can we build a reservoir that's far more cost efficient and effective, so that farmers can build them themselves, maybe with a little bit of help and financing, but at least it's achievable, it's realistic. And we built a prototype. And instead of relying on concrete and cement, we relied on a geomembrane, high density polyethylene geomembrane that was used as the base of this reservoir. And we constructed a relatively large reservoir for Yemen's coffee standards, so 900 cubic meters. And it was done at 15% the cost of a conventional reservoir. Why is this exciting? Well, it means now that the thousands and thousands of farmers across Yemen can come here, learn about how we built this reservoir, take it as a best practice, and build it in their own communities, of course, with the adaptations that would be necessary for the communities that they come from. So it acts as a model that can be scaled by farmers elsewhere. And again, it could be a game changer, considering how important irrigation and water is for Yemen's coffee growing. Let's jump into the second component, which is processing center of excellence. So we all know that you have the raw material coffee, and then you have the market, and you have the market demanding quality. What happens between the coffee tree and the time the coffee reaches the market is critical, and that's post-harvest processing. Post-harvest means after harvest processing. So what was needed in Yemen, and what is needed in Yemen, is a best practice post-harvest processing standards, so that the cherry, the moment it's picked from the tree, it's treated in a way that enhances, protects, and maybe increases, improves the quality of the coffee therein, such that the market recognizes that quality and then rewards it for the quality. So a part of this project was building a processing center that could add value to the coffee in the communities that we targeted, so that it can reach premium markets and deliver a premium to the farmers. And we built it. right? And this is really where Qima Coffee's help and expertise came in very handy and useful, because Qima Coffee specializes in PHP. That's one of its kind of strong points. It's one of its areas of differentiation. And so what we built here was an advanced specialty coffee processing center that includes, of course, things like drying beds, drying facilities, but also mechanical drying, milling, manual sorting, and what we call advanced fermentation and processing. So through this processing center, we can do interesting, innovative processing like carbonic macerations, anaerobic fermentations, and so on and so forth. And these, again, for those who understand the coffee industry and the specialty coffee value chain, these can really demand can deliver a significant premium to farmers. And it has the capacity to serve 7,500 farmers across Yemen's coffee growing regions. This is what it looks like. This is where it's based. We've split into two. We have a preliminary center, which really acts to collect the cherries, the primary step, ensure that the cherries are collected fresh, ensure that they're treated well in the first few sensitive days post-harvesting. And then we have the advanced center, which is where coffees would go from the preliminary center to and undergo further advanced processing. The preliminary center is based, both in fact centers are based really at the heart of Yemen's coffee growing lands, which places them quite strategically to serve most of Yemen's coffee growing regions, at least three of the major coffee growing regions in the heart of Yemen. Female inclusion. People have various different opinions about this. Is there an issue in Yemen? Is it not? Is it hearsay? Is it the opinions of those who come from different cultures? Well, what did the data show, right? How included are women in the value chain of coffee in Yemen? So let's start from the data. In fact, we found that we asked the question who is the first decision maker, right, in the coffee growing household. And we found that in male-led farms, 100% of the time, the decision maker was the male, maybe to be expected. Interestingly, though, in female-led farms, where really the female had the driving role, not only 9.7% of them were farms in which the woman was the first decision maker. So there is an issue, just purely from the data. There is an issue with inclusion, and so mitigations need to be introduced and implemented just to increase inclusion and, by extension, reward in the coffee growing in the coffee value chains. How do we try to do that? Well, we start with leadership and direction. So we've set up recently a project advisory board that's composed of 60% women, and what that means is that now we have a women's voices helping to direct the project and ensure that it is inclusive and representative of the needs of Yemen's women in Yemen's rural communities. So that helps us really direct the project to ensure that they are delivering what they need to and creating more inclusive value chain. And then more, let's say, practically from a value chain basis, we establish direct sourcing relationships with female growers. So we established 60 relationships with female growers across 3 governorates, where now we can be sure that the coffee comes directly from the woman, and the woman has decision-making power, and the woman is directly rewarded for the coffee that was marketed. And I guess one of the highlights of this process was having women's coffee in the auctions, and we had a women's coffee from the Mar that achieved the price point of $82 per pound, which is, I think, the highest priced women's coffee from Yemen in history, I think. So we're really happy about what's been done, and also the actual impact of what's been done, not just changing the value chain, but seeing the results behind the changes. And then this is the last component that I'll cover, at least in this presentation, which is the nursery. Now, for those who understand a little bit about coffee value chains and the importance of seed sectors in the nursery, we all appreciate that seed sectors are fundamental to having a successful, thriving, sustainable coffee value chain at origin. And so in Yemen, of course, Yemen had many issues in Yemen's coffee industry, one of which was the seed sector. There was no real seed sector in Yemen. And so we were looking to build the foundation of Yemen's seed sector. And what we built was Yemen's first, not just Yemen's largest production nursery, but Yemen's first genetically verified nursery. And this is a first for Yemen, and one of the first in the world. So it's really an achievement that puts Yemen, I think, on the global map in terms of seed sector. And so we built a nursery that has a capacity to produce 150,000 seedlings. And critically, and again, going back to the point of having high impact per dollar, the nursery is very efficient in terms of its cost of production, such that it can produce seedlings at a cost of $0.3 per seedling. Now, for the first 2 years, we gave them away for free, but having such a low cost, which is in fact about a quarter to a third of the cost of seedlings that are available in Yemen right now, it means that we can now give seedlings to farmers that are much, much cheaper than the seedlings they have access to. And critically, these are verified. The genetic background behind these seedlings is known. And so the nursery relies on DNA fingerprinting, modern irrigation, and of course, centralized fertilization system, which makes it so unique and which makes it so efficient. And why is it important nursery? Why is the nursery important in Yemen? I think Christoph will talk a little bit more about seed sectors. For me, as someone who's worked in Yemen for now 6 years, when I came into Yemen, I found I found a great amount of confusion when it came to local names, right? Where farmers would use local names, and that created a very confusing scenario. Udaini, Tufai, Dawairi, and all these are local vernacular names, but what they represent genetically was confusing. And so I think having lots of local names that are kind of confusing, and on top of that, a country where there is a lot of genetic diversity, which is Yemen, right? For those who are aware, 2 years ago, we published a paper with Dr. Christoph and Katia, which showed the amount of genetic diversity in Yemen is really unique after Ethiopia, and new unknown genetics in Yemen, right? And for those who are interested, they can follow up later on to access the scientific paper, and we'll send out an email afterwards with links to the paper and links to other things. So what we found is that Yemen has a lot of genetic diversity. So if you're in Yemen as a farmer, where there's lots of different genetics and there's lots of local names, you can imagine how it's confusing and complicated to know what to plant and to know what your planting actually is. And this is where I'll hand over to Christoph to really highlight some of the interesting examples of innovation in the project and to dig a bit deeper into the R&D examples.
Okay, thank you, Faris. So I hope everybody can hear me. Is it okay? Yeah, okay, sure. Great. So first of all, thank you, Ace, Anna, Darin, for organizing and hosting this webinar, and thank you to Veronica from Lavazza Foundation, with whom we have great contacts and always great discussions. And of course, thank you, Faris, for giving me the opportunity to present those results. So next, please. So just as a start, for Qima, ignoring R&D in Yemen was just not an option. We know that the R&D in the world, in the coffee world, is limited, but in Yemen there are not. So we need to work on hard facts and data to start real R&D. And the thing is that Yemen is so unique in terms of environment and climate that you can't benchmark against any other origin. So you need to have your own R&D. Nonetheless, when we started, and I was so happy to be part of that, is that you need to be humble. You need to be humble because there's no R&D for sure, but there are 600 years of generations of farmers growing coffee in that country. So you can't come here and just explain how to grow coffee in Yemen. You also need to learn yourself. And also R&D sometimes is a little bit scaring because you think it is long-term solution. It is for very long term. It's not always the case. I mean, once you have the good data, you identify the actual constraints, then you can go straight to some applied solutions. And that's kind of what I want to give you just a few examples in the next few slides. Next, please. So the seed sector. So of course we started a lot working on the genetic diversity of the coffee planted in Yemen, and that's the scientific paper that Faris just mentioned. There's a lot of vernacular names in Yemen, like everybody knows about Udaini, Daiwari, Tufai, and others. The thing is, is the vernacular name a good proxy for the genetics of a coffee tree? We are analyzing some data, but in general, I'm not talking about coffee, but in general in the world, it is sometimes confusing, and sometimes the vernacular names, the traditional name is not a good proxy for the genetics, meaning that you can have trees with the same name having different genetics, and sometimes trees with same genetics having different names. And that's important when you want to create a seed sector, because you want to start on a strong basis to organize the seed sector. It is so important. I will not repeat what Faris just said, and many others are saying that seed sector is so important. And for example, just an example, farmers are encouraged to replace cat with coffee, but they have no access to the verified and good planting material that they deserve in a country with such genetic diversity. Next slide, please. When you've got the good planting material for planting, it's actually not enough in Yemen. In Yemen, from the survey that we did, from the focus group discussions that we had, I realized that in Yemen, given the climate and the drought, if you want to plant your coffee and your coffee to survive, you need a 1 cubic meter hole, 1 cubic meter. So in most of the coffee countries, we might argue about some differences, but let's say on average, you would advise 50 by 50 by 50 centimeters. Which about volumes means that in Yemen, your hole must be 8 times larger than anywhere else in the world. A farmer can dig 3-5 holes per labor day in Yemen. Those are data from survey, from focus group discussions, from the farmers themselves. So we found that with the farmers, we found that this holing part, which is just part of the farming practices in a lot of countries, is really key, a key constraint in Yemen that can even prevent you to make the decision to go for planting new coffee. So that's why we experimented an equipment that you can see on this picture, an auger, like a drilling machine to drill holes, and we made some experiments, measuring the times, measuring the cost, and in fact, it happened that you can, with this machine, have 80 holes per day with 3 men managing the equipment, which means 30 holes per labor day, which is 10 times the actual figure if it is manual. And to scale it up, we are exploring, the Qima Foundation is exploring scaling up through promoting youth entrepreneurship. So having some young people, helping them to invest in this machine, and offering the service to the community, the coffee community, to do the holing in the famous fallow lands that are available in Yemen. Next, please. Another example, I'm just taking few examples, we had so much. There is like a mystery. There was like a mystery when I started discussing with Qima Coffee, Qima Foundation, with the farmers, Haris. That was the Haris was kind of a mysterious disease, but this disease was provoking a loss of 60% of production. So to make a long story quite short, we finally identified this as an insect, the coffee berry moth, which is Prophanthis smaragdina. And now we know the enemy. So when you know the enemy, it's much easier to fight against this enemy. And so now that we have this basic knowledge, we have settled some experiments to better understand the life cycle of the insect and to develop comprehensive and realistic control measures for this insect. Next, please. The dieback was another kind of mystery of most of the people that are attending the webinar, I guess, are from coffee production countries, and they know that they know dieback. Dieback is when you have quite a good production on a tree, but you have a physiological disorder, an unbalanced nutrient program, then in fact your cherries never reach maturity and they get black, and it is dieback. A lot of people think it is a fungus. It is sometimes confusing. People think it is a coffee berry disease, but it is a physical disorder due to a lack of nutrient. And in Yemen, it happens that the coffee soils are very alkaline, pH around 8. Also, all of you knowing coffee, you know that it is very high for a coffee soil. And then it is blocking the uptake of some nutrients. So hence reinforcing the dieback. So we started with an adapted soil nutrition program, and the very preliminary result, very interestingly, we are just showing an increase in production of 30%, just with preliminary results. So it is not the silver bullet, it is not the one miracle solution, but it is part of a comprehensive approach of the constraints that farmers are facing. Next one, please. And that one was really interesting. In fact, we from the data of the survey, from focus group discussion, we could see that the only way to fertilize the soil for some nutrients or even for organic matter was compost or manure, and namely manure. We could see that the farmers with a cow were better off than coffee farmers without a cow because they could use the manure for their field. But during the focus group discussions, it appeared that in fact some of the farmers, even having a cow, can't use it to enrich their soil because it is competing with cooking, in fact, because manure can be used as a source of energy for cooking. So and often cooking is also managed by women, so it goes back also to in Yemen at least, and so it relates to also a gender discussion. So a cow is very important, but it's not enough. So that's why, very interestingly, we found out that maybe a good way to help coffee soils was to explore project on solar cooker, so that you can prevent and avoid this competition for the use of manure at the heart of the household. Next, please. I love this picture, I should tell you. So this picture is taken in Sana'a, if I'm not wrong, in Yemen anyway. And as you can see my face in a TV screen in the middle. And I was sitting in my office, so I was also seeing all the people in the room, and that was one of the most fascinating focus group discussion that I had in my career. Of course, there was the language barrier. It was in Arabic, so fortunately we had some translators, but that was so fascinating. That was so interesting, the discussions, and really I was learning as much as they learned from me or from my experience. That was just fantastic. It was a great moment in my work, and I really, again, I take the opportunity to thank Faris for giving me this kind of opportunity to have such experience. And that was the output was so positive. I mean, just talking about the few innovations that I just mentioned, like about the Haris, about the dieback and fertilization, about the manure, the cows. We just discussed that together, and first checking that we were not wrong in identifying this issue as an issue, And number two, finding realistic solutions, not solutions that would be from top down, from me sitting here in the south of France, but also exchanging about what is realistic, what is possible, what is not possible, and trying to find a consensus of something that is scientifically relevant, and also something that is realistic given the conditions of the people in Yemen. So again, that was really fantastic, and I think with a lot of good results. Next, please. I think that should be that was my last slide. So I give it back to you, Faris. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Christophe. So I'll wrap up just so we're on schedule. And I hope that at this point, everyone can see that there was a lot of impact just through the stories and examples that we've given. There was a significant amount of impact delivered through this project. And I guess to wrap things up, let's try to quantify that impact. What did we actually do, and how much benefit are we actually delivering? And I guess starting with results. For this project, there were 6 components, the technical components, say, for this project, like the structure of the project is broken down to 6. Number 1 was about lead farmer training. So 165 farmers were trained in data-driven BAP. Data-driven BAP. That's one of our keywords. Data-driven, right? So not just good agricultural practice, not just pruning, right, or fertilizing, but what exactly you need to do with the context of Yemen and the challenges that you are facing there. Number 2, establish a model farm and reservoir. That through the model farm, we found fascinating challenges like holing, how difficult it is to dig a hole. That's something we would not think about. And a reservoir that has the potential to really transform Yemen's irrigation landscape. Number 3, a processing center. You know, if you want to generate income to farmers, you need to find the market, right? That's kind of economics 101. And so a processing center adds value and can deliver more value to the market, and by extension more value to the farmers. Number 4, a nursery, Yemen's largest production nursery, Yemen's first genetically verified nursery, and hopefully the building block, the foundation of Yemen's seed sector that can be built on to create something fascinating and beautiful. Number 5, sourcing and processing coffee from women, right, directly with full traceability and breaking records when it comes to coffee prices and coffee auctions. And then number 6, is changing the power structures, or trying to change the power structures and having more women on the kind of leadership and advisory boards that can help direct the project to make sure that it is inclusive of the people it claims to include. What does this all look like in numbers? This is the first kind of summary to date, and we only completed it a few months ago, the project. So to date, 1,350 farmers served, 165 farmers trained, 60 female farmers with whom we established direct relationships. In terms of increased income through the processing center, $175,000 of increased income, just increased income, the difference in income that they receive through having access to the processing center. And then in terms of the seedling distribution, just what we've given thus far, $81,000 of seedlings that have the potential to generate $300,000+ per year to beneficiaries, direct to farmers in a few years' time once they start to produce fruit. What does this look like over the next 10 years, right? So we invested around $390,000. Let's look at it over a 10-year basis. And we only looked at, there were 6 components. We only looked at processing center and nursery. So we looked at 2 out of the 6 components just for this slide. And just for those 2 components, from the increased income farmers can get through the processing center and through the seedlings that we distribute that in turn generate, of course, fruit and income, over a 10-year basis, the direct to beneficiary impact will be around $1.2 million per year, direct to farmers per year annually. This is over a 10-year basis, corrected for inflation. So the impact is incredible. If you were looking at this as a commercial project and you had an ROI of 400%, everyone would be jumping to get involved. So the impact is there. And like I said, this is looking at 2 out of 6 components. I said at the beginning of the presentation, hopefully you guys will walk away, listeners will walk away understanding that coffee can impact lives in Yemen. I hope this also shows you that not only can it can significantly impact lives and livelihoods in Yemen. Let's talk about the challenges. How do I talk about the challenges in a country like Yemen? How do I do it justice? Really, what I should do is I should step out of this and I should let the Yemen team come and talk about it, because it's a bit disingenuous to really, for me to be talking about it. I travel to Yemen, but I don't live. I'm not forced to live that environment every day. And in Yemen, if you're a Yemeni, you can't go anywhere else. You struggle for any country to accept you. What are the challenges that we face in the context of this project? The conflict, the big elephant in the room. Of course, it causes us serious problems. We had some strikes that were near our centers, and some that affected our centers, and we had some injuries in the staff. So how do you work around an active conflict environment, and how do you not ignore that at the same time, right? Fuel prices, it seems kind of trivial, but when you have to line up, not only, I mean, the fuel prices, increased 500%. Now the world is starting to feel that as well. But when you actually go to fill up the fuel, assuming you can afford 500% increase, you have to queue up for 2 days. 2 days queue up at the fuel station to get fuel. So imagine, how do you run an operation like that? How do you collect coffee? How do you build anything? How do you visit people? Extremely challenging. COVID, the other elephant in the room. And in Yemen, when you look at Yemen, it has one of the lowest vaccination rates in the world, 1.4%, with no, we had many of the team members who said, I have COVID, but they didn't even have the lateral flow test to test. So, just to help you understand how different it is, really, in every shape, way, or form. And I think credit here goes to the team, really. And I'm just here to talk on their behalf and tell their story, I think, more than anything. I think the fact that they managed to achieve what they achieved in this type of context goes a long way to say, what really the magnitude and the size of the project and the delivery and the accomplishment that they achieved. Moving on to something more positive and hopeful and forward looking and thinking, the next phase of the project. So we've completed this project. We're looking at introducing a next phase that will take from the learnings of phase one and really scale it and generate more impact and have it more holistic, even more holistic than what was already done before. So we're looking for the areas of greatest need, and we look at Yemen. And when you look at the region called Taiz, and if any of you have time after this presentation, just type Taiz, Yemen conflict in Google, and you'll see what I'm referring to. Taiz is one of the most conflict-stricken regions in Yemen. It is on the front line, in fact. It has been one of the worst hit regions in Yemen. It's also a coffee growing region in Yemen. It's probably one of the first regions that coffee hit when it came from Ethiopia into Yemen via the port of Mocha. So there's a history there. It is a great need. And it's also the region, Taiz the region, it's where the port of Mocha lies. So it's where one of the most historic symbols of coffee trading exists. So we want to target this area of both beauty and destruction, right? It has both, it's on the conflict, but it also has all these interesting symbols and this beautiful coffee history. And we want to target this area to really re-enable coffee growing, redevelop coffee growing in that region, and also create a cultural activities that will restore the glory, both domestically and internationally, help to restore the glory of that region in terms of coffee growing and its importance of coffee growing, both domestically and to the international community. These are the partners that we currently have with us. Of course, the Lavazza Foundation are on board, and again, are generously and kindly and courageously getting involved in pushing these projects forward. Qima Coffee will definitely be involved. The Qima Foundation will carry on to implement, and of course, ACE are already involved by extension of the work that they're doing with us and the work that they'll be doing in the future for this next phase of the project. We are also seeking any keen additional partners, so anyone else who wants to get involved from the either private sector, coffee companies, coffee trading businesses, or the NGO or development sector. If this sounds like something that you would be interested in getting involved in, then please do reach out, and we'll have a separate probably a session or webinar or something about the next phase. But I guess to summarize, really, we've achieved what we've achieved, and we're very proud of it, and we've achieved it in radical challenges in an environment, and we're looking to now grow and scale that, having proven what coffee can do to lives and livelihoods in a country like Yemen. And I'll end with the much needed, necessary acknowledgements, because this project would not have been possible without the people on this slide, starting with the Lavazza Foundation, who I really, when I say courageously, I really mean that, because there are, like I said earlier, there are very few organizations who are willing to do something for development in Yemen, right? It's always like, let's focus on humanitarian assistance, and I don't want to do that because it's too complicated. Lavazza were there from day one, and they had really the courage in the stomach to say, let's do it, take that risk. And for that, we are forever indebted. And I really mean that. It's not a dramatic word. Like, we are extremely grateful for the stance of Lavazza and for helping to lead the way in coffee development in Yemen. And of course, the Qima Foundation, like I said, I'm really here to talk about them. But the Qima Foundation team drove this on the ground. You know, they worked night and day to make it happen in the climate and in the conditions and the challenges that I described. Of course, Qima Coffee, Chloe, who's no longer here, but played the key, no longer with us, but she played the key role in really making this happen and connecting the Qima Foundation, Qima Coffee, and Ahmed Mahyoub from the operations team in Yemen, who drive the processing side to make sure that the processing infrastructure that was set up was appropriate to add value. And of course, last but not least, Dr. Christoph, who continues to, and maybe he doesn't like me talking about him when he's here, but he continues to really help us drive and innovate and make sure that we are thinking outside the box and that we are developing research-driven solutions that have an impact. And like similarly to the case with Lavazza, we really struggled to find people who are willing to get involved in Yemen. And the fact that Christoph not only was willing, but was generous in the knowledge and experience that he shares with us is something that we are, again, deeply grateful and indebted for. With that, I'll end and I'll pass it back to Darren. Thank you for your attention and time, and thank you for the opportunity, Darren.
Great, Faris and Christoph, thank you so much for that. There's so much there to dig in on, and we've already been getting some questions that have been answered, and some that we'll get back to at the end. And I think the thing that the takeaway for me on this so far is just the fact that one, the amount of challenges that you're facing to be able to actually get impact, but also to be able to start to measure where the challenges are. And also, I've seen other development projects in the past where you solved one problem, maybe fully or partially, but then you realize there are other issues like the solar cookers, and looking at it comprehensively and holistically is really critical to success. And I want to say that I feel like that you've looked at every possible angle to make the impact significant. So really interesting. With that, I'd like to introduce Veronica Rossi, who's the Sustainability Senior Manager at Lavazza Foundation. And we're very fortunate to have you here today. And please take it away. We're excited to see your presentation. So thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you for having us, for organizing this. It's really a pleasure and honor to be here to share this experience. And I don't have a presentation. I have a video summarizing what Lavazza Foundation does. And I'm gonna show the video, and then I'm gonna just add some comments on what Faris and Christoph said on especially what drove us as Lavazza Foundation to join this project, which started really as a dream a couple of years ago. So let's have a look at this video. I'm just a note on the video. This is a collection of pictures of real beneficiaries of Lavazza Foundation projects all around the world. So these are real people already working with us in other countries. It should work. So actually, this video was done before we met Faris. But if you look at all the things which were listed on the videos, these are exactly the features of the project that Faris just described. So the matching was really natural. But I want to tell you a story about how we decided to partner with Qima and why we decided to believe in this project. Actually, it all happened because of coffee, of course. It was, I think, Faris, in Berlin, at the World of Coffee in Berlin in 2019, that my colleague, one of our master blender and one of our best coffee taster in Lavazza, Cristiano Portis, was in Berlin to scout the best coffees in the world. Because at the time, Lavazza was planning to open, which happened in 2020, our specialty coffee roasting line and specialty coffee brand, which is 1895 Coffee Designers by Lavazza. And Cristiano was going around the world before COVID. It was possible to go around the world to scout good coffees, and he found in a booth in Berlin Faris with his beautiful coffee. And Cristiano came back to Italy saying, I found something really huge, special, top. And so things started to work on the specialty coffee aspect, nothing to do with Lavazza Foundation, nothing to do with projects. My colleagues in the quality department decided to engage with Qima to buy coffee from that country, from those communities, and Qima Coffee became the first Lavazza specialty line product, the first ever, and it still is. In our, you're all invited to come to Torino to visit our specialty coffee section of our plant, which is beautiful. It's an experience, let's say. And still there you have the first coffee coming from Qima and coming from Yemen there displayed like in a museum. What was interesting was that during this commercial exchanges and relationship, my colleagues from the quality department and coffee buying department, with whom I have a very nice relationship, they called me telling me, you know, Veronica, we have a very nice coffee from this new line, and we just came to know that they have a very nice foundation that they are developing right now. They're searching for new partners. Would you like to have a chat with them? It all started like that. And it was huge for us because it was a new foundation trying to do something in a country where, for us, Lavazza Foundation, 20 years of history, more than 140,000 coffee farmers benefiting from our projects, more than 90 NGOs working with us. We never had the chance to go to Yemen. It was the first time that we had a proposal to go there. It was a dream for us. I mean, we have been asking to the NGOs we have been working with for many years, can we do something in Yemen? Can we do something in Yemen? But the answer, of course, was it's too difficult because of the conflict. It's too difficult because of access. We actually did different humanitarian missions in Yemen for the conflict, emergency relief projects, nothing to do with coffee. But in that kind of situation, we had one local foundation providing coffee to Lavazza, asking for some support for a coffee development project. So it was really very, very good and interesting for us. So we just, started to work with Faris, at the time Chloe, working with us to shape the project together. What we always like as Lavazza Foundation is to co-design the projects together with the partners we work with. We don't like to be just, supporters, but we like to, bother our partners to do things together. So we started to co-design. And what really impressed us at the time and today, after 2 years of work, is the holistic approach that Qima Foundation had, which is exactly what Lavazza Foundation look for in every partner we partner with. So the idea of working on good agricultural practices, genetics, and then Christophe, who already worked with us in other project, came in. Women empowerment. It was really huge and very interesting. And what was even more interesting is that in all this, dreamy situation, COVID pandemic arrived. We started the project in the middle, just before COVID decided to come into our lives. And so what is even more an element of pride for me is that we managed to carry on with the project to confirm investments, because in the first months of COVID, bars were closed. We in the coffee industry had quite of a shiver because of investments. We didn't know what would happen. So Lavazza Foundation decided to confirm investments in this project because we really wanted to go on, and this paid in all senses because results are great. And we are so proud that we can claim to be, kind of the first coffee roasting company or foundation linked to a coffee roasting company to have supported a coffee development project in Yemen. So it was really, really interesting and cool for us. So now we, as Faris already anticipated, decided to explore this new possibility in this Mocha Revival project. So in the area of Thais, we are really happy and excited to start this new adventure. And as Faris was saying, we are really open to additional partners. This is really important for me to pass as a message. In Lavazza Foundation and in general, as Lavazza Group, when we work on sustainability projects, we really like to work with partners, being also competitors. We have projects, sustainability projects with Nespresso, with Starbucks, with JD in many countries. So it's really important for us when it comes to sustainability to work also with other roasters. So if you want to join us, please do, as well as, of course, NGOs and institutes, research institute, university. The more people is investing in this country and in this kind of projects, I think that the most benefit is for the all industry, because the outcomes of this project, of course, are beneficial for those living in the country and living because of coffee, but those results are really important and interesting for the coffee industry. The article they were mentioning, and I saw there's some questions, so I'm gonna hand my speech in a minute so we can engage in a conversation. But the results of that article and the research, the results that Faris showed about the return on investment and how the proves that coffee can be prosperous if properly treated, these results are not just scalable, but these are examples for the whole coffee industry and for all the sustainability practitioners like me, because it's really important to take the results of those projects and replicate this. Because all what we saw, solar cookers, manure management, this just happened in Yemen, but it can be replicated also in Ethiopia or Colombia. So it's really, really important to partner also on an intellectual point of view to take the results of this very successful project and spread them in the coffee industry, because there's a huge need of solutions, of on-field solutions for the sustainability of our sector. So again, it was a very, very exciting journey. We are very happy to have been part of that. We are gonna present this project also here in Turin, in Italy, in September at the International Festival of Slow Food, which will take place 22nd and 23rd of September here. And we're gonna present this project with Faris again also here to the community of the food lovers in Italy. So if you're around in Europe and in Italy, you want to come, you're welcome in Torino. And if you agree, I'll go to the Q&A sessions because I think it's the most interesting part of today's conversation. Thank you very much. Shukran.
Thank you, Veronica. That was great. Before we have Fahad come on and close out before Q&A, I just want to take note of something Veronica said about the alliance of whether they're competitors or other organizations, NGOs, governments. We're at a point right now where there's a rallying point for whether it's climate related issues that are impacting coffee farmers or political issues. I think we all recognize in this specialty industry that we're stronger if we work together, and the outcome is critical for our business structures and for the social structures in these countries where there are challenges. But I love to see that kind of interconnectedness. So really interesting. And thank you. Fahad Raja is the Global Business Development Manager for Qima Coffee and is also based in London. And I'm going to hand it over to you to talk a little bit about the auction and some of the other components of the program that we're doing jointly together. So Fahad, please.
Hi, thank you very much, Darren. Sorry, I was muted. Typical problem in the post-COVID world of Zoom, basically. So thank you very much for having me on the presentation. My name is Fahad Raja. I am the Global Business Development Manager for Qima Coffee. And I think it's probably a good opportunity for me to introduce myself. Some of you I've spoken to by email, some of you I've have face-to-face conversations with. But it's helpful for me to give some context on why I decided to join Qima, because I think it fundamentally it's driven by the philosophy of the organization, and it's driven by a desire to act, but act with, in many cases, the limited means we have to try and affect positive change on a much larger scale. A little bit of background on me, I grew up in the UK and had spent about a decade working in finance and worked in investment banking and for a hedge fund, and worked at organizations such as Credit Suisse, UBS, and large kind of organizations where really you're part of you're a small cog in a very large organization. And ultimately, I think COVID, like many people, led me to reevaluate what did I want in life in terms of how can I be doing things that affect positively the people around me and the society around me. And I think ultimately all of those questions really led me to think about what I was doing on a day-to-day basis. And I started to look at organizations and industries, and I wanted to be at a place where we were trying to change things for the long term, not trying to have short-term interventions, not trying to have a plaster to kind of fix the small-term problems, but really fundamentally try to address challenges that really change society and hope to affect change in society. And really, I think that confluence led me to kind of coffee and to Qima. And really, it's not about me doing anything great. It's really raising the profile and helping to elevate the stories of the poorest and weakest in society, but showing them this is now their time to stand up. They have something that's really a vision of positive change for the future. And Qima has really been doing that. And I think that's the story of why I joined Qima, and really one of the main reasons that I got engaged with the organization. And one part of that, a critical part of that really was around the auction. The auction creates a lot of buzz every year. And naturally speaking, it's one of the things that I'll obviously talk about. Give me 1 second. Sorry, I will share my screen. And one of the ways I became engaged with Qima and Yemeni Coffee was actually learning more about the auction. And that's kind of what I will flick through to. So, and I think one of the things that I learned was that a lot of origins, the way they reignite interest in their coffee or just come to market is really through auctions, because people want to be understanding what is the best a country can produce, because really ultimately that sets the benchmark for everyone else. And that's where I think this auction is so powerful, because it engages people in conversations. And really, I think this comes back to the deeper history of Qima and ACE, because ultimately it was those conversations in 2018 which ultimately have led to ACE and Qima partnering as friends and collaborators in growing this every single year. And I think the story is that, and Faris and Darren will know the details, is that in 2018, Darren and Faris met, and really they came up with the idea of doing a cup of excellence for Yemen. Now, I think you also have to be pragmatic. You're working in a conflict zone in an incredibly complicated country, and you have to be pragmatic and start saying, okay, if I can't do it tomorrow, what can I do? And how can I take natural steps to allow me to go on that journey? And ultimately what that led to was actually, let's reignite the private collection auction. It's something that I think ACE have launched again in 2019 to reinvigorate. And really, we were the partners they did it with, because I think there was a natural opportunity to do it. And so it started off quite small. We focused on specific regions, and really we wanted to be a test case. We didn't want to go out and try to do something that was unsustainable. Again, coming back to the point about sustainability, but also it really proved to be a success. We selected a few regions. We made sure that what we said we delivered essentially. And that gives us the confidence to expand it and really increase accessibility in terms of the number of farmers the following year. And really that led us to kind of opening it up to the entire Qima sourcing network in 2020. And really that again was an incredible success, right? And you saw that positive snowball effect of what was going on. And ultimately, I think, again, to 2020, even during the challenges of COVID, etc., all of those facets, we realized there is a genuine conversation that people want to have. And ultimately, what that then led us to was thinking, how do we now expand this to create the best of Yemen, essentially? And the idea really comes back, building on the foundations and foundations of sustainability and accessibility. We opened it to all. And this includes farmers, traders, cooperatives. And the whole idea was that if we do this, then it allows us, the whole coffee farming community, to engage with on a national level, with Yemen being the front and center of their attention. And I think really 2022 is expanding that. And I think, again, with the largest national auction, again, with a focus on development and a focus on really elevating the platform and the conversation around Yemeni farmers. And I really genuinely believe each year, each step we've taken is not just about making it bigger, it's really about making it sustainable and helping it grow. Because really throughout all of this conversation, the best of Yemen is a celebration of the best farmers in Yemen. And it's really about them. It's not about us, it's not about it's really about the roasters and roasters elevating and showing the natural product that the coffee farmers are producing around the world. So really, for all of us, this is an opportunity to celebrate that. So I think it's, many of you will know about Best of Yemen, but a lot of you, maybe the first engagement you've had with it, right? And really, what is the fundamental driving philosophy around the Best of Yemen, right? In essence, it is about being national. And this is the step we took last year, is to become national, to be farmer-centric. Really, the farmer is the person that we're trying to elevate in this conversation. And it's apolitical. It's an apolitical auction. Ultimately, I think this is a very sensitive subject, but it's one that is incredibly important. We're working in a very complicated origin, with really the complexity overlaid by conflict. And the combination of those two factors mean that we have to ensure that when we work with farmers, we do not favor one over the other. We need to ensure that we are fair and accessible to all. There is no siding on one side or another, because if we do that, really it fundamentally detracts away from the idea that we're open and inclusive for all. And I think that's a really important point that I want to highlight, and something that I'll probably touch upon later as well. So I think just re-emphasizing, this year's auction we've had over 2,000 submissions. Last year we had over 1,500. This year we've had over 2,000. Each year continues to grow. People are becoming more aware of it, and farmers are realizing that this is my opportunity to really elevate my coffee and present it with some of the best coffees in Yemen, but not just Yemen, around the world. And really the apolitical, grassroots-led and open to all is what I alluded to earlier on. But again, I think it's worth re-emphasizing that this has to be this has to be one of the key aspects of us making this a sustainable change for the future, right? Because ultimately, coffee is a natural commodity, and no single individual or no single party has ownership over that. It's for all. It's for the country, and it's for all the people. And only that way can everyone engage with it in a fair and positive manner. And I think the next one I'm really proud of. I come to the coffee industry pretty new, right? I used to drink my flat whites and my lattes 2 years ago, and really this is the last year and a half I really started to actually try to understand, like the intricacies of the coffee supply chain. That was the extent of my engagement with the local coffee shop. Now, really, suddenly we are the Best of Yemen. We're the only coffee auction that relies on an international independent jury, right? And by that, I mean, we don't go into an auction thinking we want 29 coffees that are going to be 99 plus, right? But because ultimately what we want is we want Yemeni coffee to stand up on a global level and say, this is what we present. And this is representative of what the true quality of our coffee is like when you benchmark it around the world. And that, I think, has been supported by so many people. It's the largest jury in any coffee auction today. I think Darren will confirm that's probably the case. 66 cuppers in 13 countries. It just shows you that, and 30 companies, by the way. And it just shows you that people are very, very keen to engage with Yemeni coffee, both for the coffee quality, which has to be exceptional, but also for the opportunity to engage with ACE and Qima, and as a Qima Foundation, as an organization, as a vehicle for positive change for the future. So I think that's quite important for me to kind of articulate there. So talking about everything I've talked about, sustainability, etc. I think one of the founding principles of Qima, and if I go back to the articles of how we call it incorporation, etc., equitability is fundamental to what we do. And it's the same when it comes to the Best of Yemen 2022 Catalyzing Peace and Prosperity auction. And how do we actually manifest that? There's a lot of conversations people have about equitability, etc., but what does it actually mean? On the very, very first filter, we give some of the highest prices. Well, we give the highest prices in Yemen for coffee cherry. And if you want to know the specific numbers, it's about $3 a kilo. And if you compare that globally, that's some of the highest in the world. And this is $3 for cherry per kilo. Now, second aspect of this auction in particular is, well, 50% profit share scheme with our farmers. Now, what does that mean on a total proceeds basis? On average, the farmer gets 60% of the proceeds for the lot in terms of how much it's sold. But that increases to anywhere up to 80 to 85% for other farmers. So the baseline of what the farmer is getting is way beyond what they would get in the market if they were just selling it generally. And I think that's one of the factors that what we've done with ACE as a partnership is elevate the profile of Yemeni coffee so that these farmers are able to generate livelihoods that are far greater than what they would have generated many years ago. And that's, again, a long, sustained journey that Qima and ACE and all of our supporters have been on to allow us to do that. And kind of going back to it, on a much more basic level, we're currently selling our sample sets. I think there's only about 20 left, and 50% of the sample set proceeds have been donated will be donated to the Qima Foundation. So the idea is that everything we can, we donate back into the foundation as a means and a vehicle of positive affecting positive change. And talking about the auction as a wraparound now, 10% of all auction proceeds will be donated to the Qima Foundation. So that's on top of everything else we're doing. 10% of the proceeds will go directly to the foundation and really to drive some of the work that Faris has been talking about. Because these things, there's a degree of sustainability that occurs by having an annual auction, the positive feedback loop that we get, the capital that we can then put into projects like the one we've done with Lavazza, but hopefully many others across Yemen, which is the idea is about building this into a long-term kind of vision of change, essentially, a positive change. And finally, I think that idea about ethos and equitability, really, Qima was founded on the principle that 10% of our profits, and this is a pre-existing pledge from day one, was to go to basically to Qima Foundation and to charitable projects. And that remains the case, and that will always remain the case ad infinitum. And I think that's really important for people to realize that we're not doing this as a one-off. This is part of our fundamental philosophy of how we operate as an organization, but also how we think about change in the long run. And so talking a little bit more about the theme of peace and prosperity for 2022. Really, I think what we've learned over the last 4 or 5 years, and a lot of it from my conversations with Faris, but also from our supporters, is that coffee really is a vehicle for change for society. And you can look at Colombia, you can look at other origins, but really sustainable development in coffee is an avenue for enacting peace and prosperity in the long run for people at origin. And really for Yemen, we've seen that over the last 4 or 5 years, each year that we continue to work, we realize coffee can really contribute to that change. And I think it's really proven to be a catalyst of change for communities that were thinking about leaving coffee for whatever reasons, whether it was not being able to generate enough livelihood, or think about alternative crops, or looking at alternative livelihoods, right? And some of them are not easy choices. They've decided, we've realized that if we can offer them an alternative, which allows them to have a livelihood which is sustainable, which is positive, which is in line with their history. Like coffee in Yemen goes back 600 years. And really, for many of these farmers, this is a heritage that they're inheriting. It's not a product, it's a heritage. And they would much rather carry that on. And I think that can really be an antidote in the long run to conflict. Because ultimately, when we meet the needs of the people find a way of coming together and resolving the issues. But until we do that, that becomes a longer term goal. And so I really think coffee can be a vehicle of that. And kind of as a very practical basis, all of the stuff I've talked about, how much we're committing from the auction, the contributions from Best of Yemen 2022 will go towards the upcoming Mocha Revival project that Faris talked about. He'll talk about it much better than I could ever, really. So I won't necessarily dig into that. So I think on a very kind of on kind of a summary basis, how can you get involved? And I think the message here is really simple: is that for roasters that really please get involved with the auction. We have sample sets that are currently on sales. As I mentioned, there's 20 left, but so they're running out really quickly, and only a couple of days left to buy those. But really, what I want to do is I want you to use that coffee as a way of you engaging with Yemeni coffee, but also engaging with the auction. Some of our lots go down from 13 kilos. So really, some of the farmers we're working with are really small farmers. So it allows all sizes of roasters to get engaged. On the small side, we're going all the way to much larger lots. And so the idea is that we should be open to all, both in the roasting community, but also in the farming community. And that's what our hope is. And all of these have been independently selected by the jury. So it shows you the variety across the spectrum, both in terms of size and volume. So I think for roasters, that's the main message: is please get involved, buy your sample sets, and join the auction on the 9th of August, because the work you've been doing and the work you are doing is having a positive impact in Yemen and on the ground. And I think for everyone else that's on this call, one of the most important things here is igniting the conversation for Yemeni coffee. When you go into a cafe shop, ask, do they have Yemeni coffee? If they have Yemeni coffee, ask the questions around how is it being sourced? What's the story behind it? How are farmers being compensated? And is it a vehicle for positive change, or is it being used in a negative way? And all of these questions, the more people ask, the more you ignite a conversation. And I think the more we do that, the better the overall conversation is for everyone coming to the table for Yemeni coffee. And I think as my final kind of parting message is that this auction is about the farmers. It's about the farmers and our partners who are supporting them, because really that's how we raise the conversation. We increase the decibels, really, and the world hears that actually Yemen has fantastic coffee. There's good that we can do by partnering with organizations that are affecting positive change, and our consumers can understand that and enjoy that whilst having their morning coffee. So I think that's just about it from my side. So I'll pass back to Darren.
Right. Thank you very much. That's great. And thank you for reminding the audience about the upcoming auction. And I think it's really interesting, before we open it up to questions, just that, historically, having been someone that was a lover of Yemen coffees and learning about Yemeni coffees in the mid to late 80s here in the Northwest in Portland, Oregon, and knowing during that time that you saw less and less Yemeni coffee being offered in the U.S. market, and always with a big question mark, like why aren't there wonderful coffees coming from Yemen? And for obvious reasons, we found out and learned a lot about appropriation of coffees in Yemen and the relationship between Ethiopia and Yemen. And we're at a whole different point now than we were then, where the level of trust and understanding about companies like Qima that are doing the work that they're doing on the ground to bring, pure, wonderful lots of Yemen coffees to the market. It's all built on trust and built on the integrity of the sourcing around the coffees, and that plays out into the auction structure and the competition structure. So I think that is all, really just building on this sense of revolution or renaissance that I think Qima has really fostered. And now we have a group of buyers around the world that are recognizing and appreciating that trust of quality and the trust of relationship. And I think it's vital to the future of Yemen specialty coffee. So I want to turn it back to Anna to field some questions. I know we do have a few here, so I think we should probably get right to it. Anna, I don't know if you want to address in order, so.
Oops, okay, yeah, thank you everyone for sending in your questions. We're getting a few questions from Facebook as well, so we'll start with the first one. Okay, so this is for Christoph, Dr. Christoph. Do you think using insecticides will be one of the solutions to fight off caries, the coffee berry moth?
Actually, thanks for this question. Actually, this is one of the few areas where we can benchmark for Yemen, because this coffee berry moth has been observed and has been damaging coffee in the past in Kenya, for example, and also in the French island of La Réunion, where there is the Bourbon pointu over there. So some institutes like CIRAD from France, for example, they have worked on this insect. And in the La Réunion Island, which is the Bourbon Island, the former Bourbon Island, they have seen that an organic, I insist, organic insecticide, which is a BT insecticide, is working on this insect. So it is a lead that we are pursuing right now to control this insect. Not the only one, but part of it.
Thanks. Actually, there's another question for you. Is it possible to diversify coffee farms in Yemen? What are the most deficits present in Yemen soil, and how can Yemen track carbon footprint due to these conditions presented?
Okay. So I try to be quick. So diversification, yes, of course. Diversification is already there. In fact, we have seen in the survey that 50% of the revenues comes from coffee, and other parts mainly from corn and cat in the coffee regions. So what we would like to do also is to have people cultivating cat diversifying with coffee, so that we can increase the share of coffee. So yes, diversification is possible, wishable, already there, but we can help to expand it. The most deficient in soil, we have not yet a soil map of Yemen, of coffee regions. What we do know is that the pH is really high, around 8. And this is really, when you have such a pH, then it is very difficult for the plant to uptake, for the uptake of other nutrients. So we are also working on that part, and hopefully, maybe in future projects, we can fine-tune a soil map. Carbon footprint. I'm happy that we have this question. There's a lot of, carbon footprint in the world. One of the drivers of the carbon footprint is land use and the land use change. And more specifically, when you go from forest to coffee, which we absolutely try to avoid. this will never happen in Yemen. I mean, I think the legislation for accounting for deforestation is in 20 years, not 600 years. So now in Yemen, when you plant coffee, in fact, you are building carbon stocks because you are coming from a fallow land without trees, without forest, without nothing. And coffee is actually a way to have a positive impact with carbon footprint in Yemen. So again, a lot of a big territory to explore. But carbon footprint, Yemeni coffee might have the least carbon footprint in the world.
Interesting. Okay, this one I'm going to send to the Qima team. Does the Yemeni government add any assistance?
Yeah, I can take this one. I think so you have different state representation in Yemen, right, across the country. So it depends. You have to talk about different governments, I guess, plural. I think they facilitate local work in the areas that they govern and work in, and then it's really a case-by-case basis. I think that unfortunately, because of the conflict, the state representation that exists in Yemen, they're busy with those issues, right? With the conflict, which is I guess is the underaddressed, underrepresented, sinister side of a conflict. You have the conflict and the direct death and destruction that it causes, but then you have the fact that everyone's busy with the conflict and it stops everyone from doing other things like building and focusing on coffee, for example. So I think there are people that within the state's representation of Yemen who do want to do things. Sometimes we get people who don't or are actively against it. So it's really a case-by-case basis. I guess for us, it's the fact that we continue regardless, and that because we are apolitical and we really represent everyone and no one, we get to operate in Yemen and to achieve the things that we've spoken about today. But it is a difficult environment to navigate through, in all honesty.
Thanks. And while we're talking about, I guess you can answer this one. This is from Burke. When is the harvest season in Yemen?
So you have two harvests. You have the major crop and the fly crop. The major crop is from, depends, but October, November, up until January, February sometimes. And the fly crop is typically March, April, and it goes all the way to June, July.
Thanks. And here's one from Angela Benedict Abardo. Since the announcement of Yemenia as a new mother population of varieties, I noticed this year's results have more Yemenia compared to previous Best of Yemens. Is it because more and more coffees are still being genetically tested? It's great to see majority of entries are Yemenia.
It's an interesting one. I haven't compared the stats of Yemenia representation this year versus last year. I remember last year it was the top 10 were all Yemenia. So I think what we're seeing definitely since we did the work, we're seeing that actually the coffees that score the highest are indeed Yemenia. It's almost a consequence and as opposed to a design-led process. So, and that's a good thing, because what we're seeing then is that when we give a certain number of coffees to a jury blind, because the jury don't know anything about this coded, right? For those who don't know this process, it's all blind. The international jury cup blind, so they have no idea what they're cupping. Then the coffees they tend to choose as the highest scoring ones are from the Yemeni mother population. So I think it's more indicative of the quality potential of the Yemenia than the fact that than anything else really. But the good thing, I guess, is that we are seeing other coffees from other regions also starting to have more representation in the auction. What we're seeing is that it's not all Yemenia. You're having other coffees from the other mother populations that's also getting into the auction.
Okay, thanks. This is you might have mentioned this. Are you and this is also for, I guess, for the Qima team. Are you also planning to develop reservoirs and nurseries in Thais through Milk Revival project? What are your future plans?
I think, as Veronica discussed, we are co-developing, co-designing the project with the Lavazza Foundation. I think it definitely makes sense to learn and use what we've already done previously and kind of scale the impact of that. So I think we're looking at reservoir and model farm components in the next phase, but it's still a work in progress. And Veronica, if you want to add anything, then feel free to.
No, it really depends on the needs of the ground. So, of course, water and drought are problems. So probably it will be part of the plan, but it really depends on the needs assessment that we're gonna do.
Okay, great, thank you. This is from Jacob. With all the projects Qima and Lavazza is working on in Yemen, what has your experience been with the Yemeni government in pursuing these development projects?
It's another complicated one. I think it's the same as really the previous question.
Mhm.
The government representation, however you want to see it, they're busy with other issues that include the conflict, that include the mess that's created by the conflict. And so I think it's hard to also expect that we seek it, we look for cooperation on kind of local level, and wherever we get it, it's great, and where we don't, we build regardless. We build nonetheless. And I think what I mean there is that we don't wait for support. Of course, we want to make sure that it's in coordination with any local state representation, but we want to not be held back by waiting for someone to kind of hand anything out.
Thanks. Okay, are there any specific varieties you are focusing on in the nursery to maintain sustainability for the coffee specialty industry?
Maybe Christoph, it's good for you to maybe address that.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you for the question. So I would like to precise, and I think the link to our article last year has been shared. That really about genetics, we have started an exploratory phase where we are more than anything else describing the landscape, the coffee genetic landscape, so that we can first know, describe, and then maybe decide to focus on one variety or another. We started, I think, less than 2 years. So it is we can't pretend that we have all the information. We are working on that, of course. So, but what we are doing, and sorry, I use the we, but as what is to make sure that if, for example, in a given region, we have seen from survey that there is a given genetic background, not varieties, but given genetic background, given mother population, let's say, then we make sure that the seedlings that are distributed in that region are of the same genetics, so that we don't mix and we give, it is just starting to put a little bit of order. Talking about varieties will be the next step, but we have started the exploration.
Okay, thank you. We have 2 more questions here and then we'll close up. This one I'm going to send to Faris. Okay, from Burke. Love the alchemy process. Can you tell us the story behind it?
Yeah, interesting question. Yeah, so one of the things that we found, the first thing that we found, kind of one of the major challenges with Yemen coffee from a value chain perspective, was post-harvest processing was bad, right? So they would pick the cherries badly, then they would store them badly, then they would dry them badly. The whole thing was a mess. So the first thing that we came in and did was just have a quality assurance, really good quality assurance protocols from cherry to export. And here I'm talking about the natural process. So we made sure that we picked the red cherry was picked, dried super carefully, treated really in the highest of standards, measured for moisture daily, really managed the process. And we found that actually the quality differential was huge from what we had before to that, just that, not even speaking about alchemy. We saw 8, 9, 10 point differentials. So we said, that's interesting. What else can we do, right? If that's what can be achieved by a very, very good kind of natural, excellent managed natural process, what else can we do? Especially when you start to look at the coffee growing world and you see, well, all sorts of experimental processing coming out of South America and Latin America and fermentations. And then my background on top of that is a process engineer. I studied chemical and process engineering. I worked in process engineering for several years in the energy industry. So well, that's an interesting opportunity. What value can be added in that post-harvest processing beyond just carefully drying the coffees and managing them? And that was a whole area that we got into. So we ran 1,000+ experiments, really 1,000+ experiments, super small scale, to understand, well, what happens when you introduce oxygen or take out oxygen or introduce other gases or components or increase the pressure or reduce the temperature. And we found really interesting results that showed that actually you can maintain the terroir of the cup. You can maintain the terroir of the cup, the innate terroir of the cup. So you maintain the cup character and the representation of origin, but enhance some qualities so that you have something different, something exciting, something that either coffee veterans will love. So we have some people who, some very established, well-known organizations, kind of say in Europe, right, where you wouldn't expect them to like fermentation, that buy Alchemy coffees. But it's also a really good gateway specialty coffee where people who are struggling to maybe differentiate between what's specialty, what's not, say, taste this and now understand what can be done, right, in post-harvest processing. And typically we also then find them starting to appreciate other coffees like the naturals, the honeys, and the wash. So I think it's a really good tool to engage with the market. And of course, the Alchemy, they demand a premium. There's a lot of work that goes into them, so they cost more, but they also achieve a really good premium. So they're also a really good way of passing those premiums to farmers. And then we have very different processes of Alchemy, and each Alchemy lot we sell, we typically share what the process is involved. It's typically a combination of gases, pressurized fermentation, slow drying, and resting. Typically depends on what variation is.
Cool, thank you. Okay, here's one from Facebook. Sending it to Faris or the Qima team. Can you elaborate on how the 50% profit share scheme works for farmers? The upfront price of $3 per kilo seems low relative to hundreds of dollars per kilo prices at the auctions.
Great question. Yeah, I like these questions. So I think first thing to say, and I think there's a bit of a misconception when it comes to auctions. We don't do the auction. We don't make much money from the auction. In fact, sometimes we don't make any. So the reason we run the auctions, and this might sound surprising when people see hundreds of dollars per kilo, and we'll explain that. The reason we run auctions is really to bring attention to Yemen as a coffee growing origin and to reward farmers and get them excited about coffee growing. So what happens in this case? So let's take an example of $100 a kilo. Say we take $100 a kilo. We give the farmers $3 a kilo. In Yemen, we typically need 10 to 11 kilos of cherry to get 1 kilo of green. So you multiply that $3 by say 11 or say 10 to keep it simple. So you're on $30 a kilo upfront to the farmer. And then you have a 50% profit share. So you sell it for $100 a kilo in the auction. You take $70 is your profit because you paid $30 for it in this regard. And you give $35 back to the farmer. So far the farmer has $30 plus $35, so $65, leaving $35 for Qima. On top of that, we then do 10% of auction proceeds that go to charity. On top of that, we do 50% of sample sales that would go to charity. On top of that, we do 10% of the total profits of Qima Coffee that go to charity. So actually, and I haven't spoken anything about how the cost of an auction, and Darren and Anna can talk to that. The cost of promoting it, the cost of traveling and doing cupping tours, the cost of the team actually engaging and getting the message out there, the cost of the transport and the logistics. So honestly speaking, and really say this in all honesty, and people, I'd welcome people to engage with us offline to really go into details. We don't do auctions for profit. We do it because we think it's an important vehicle to market Yemeni coffee. What do we see on the ground? We see thousands of farmers get excited about auction. Thousands of farmers, right? Even though only 29 make it, it acts as a great tool of motivation and incentive to get farmers talking about coffee and saying, well, if I do a good job and if I do what I'm supposed to do, look what can be achieved. So that's really honestly the major driving principle behind it. And I hope that example has given some idea of how it works.
And helps raise the profile of the whole industry in Yemen as well because of that incentive.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, just one more question and then we'll end. I think this is an interesting question from Ben, and I will send this to Christophe. Is there a possibility for taking a Yemenia plant to somewhere like Colombia and trying to cultivate it there?
That's an interesting question, and it's a tough one. Huh? So I'm going to talk about principles. I'm going to talk about principles, and I think we already discussed it with Faris, but please stop me, Faris, if I'm wrong. In principles, there are international regulations that are made to acknowledge the participation of farmers, of community of farmers, to the maintenance of genetic diversity. So it means that whatever you would like to do outside of Yemen with some genetic resources that are specific to Yemen and maintained by Yemeni communities, then you would have to follow the proper international regulations that exist. Of course, this is not easy currently in Yemen, because in fact, the representation of the farmers is the government. There is in the plant treaty, which is the UN and FAO program, you've got a resource person in each country which is responsible for this kind of regulation. So I think it is really important to do all by the book. So my answer to that question would be that be patient, I think, not only the farmers, but also maybe the scientific community, because it is really important to follow the regulation, to respect the local communities that have maintained those genetic resources for 6 centuries, and when it is done correctly, then it is you lose a little bit of time, but at the same time you gain a lot of time in terms of everyone benefiting and being rewarded, when it is the case, about those genetic resources. I hope I hope you are not disappointed by this answer, but for growing Yemenia in Colombia, but be patient, I think.
And maybe I would just add to that, because we also have this question sometimes, where would you plant elsewhere? And the first answer, and I think to confirm and reiterate Christoph's stance, first of all, there are international protocols and treaties that would prevent that, and mean that would be illegal. And secondly, as Christoph was alluding to, if that were to ever happen, it would have to be with the state of Yemen, or the government of Yemen's knowledge and under their kind of guidance and instructions. So I think indeed, I think it's something that is not even on the table right now, and would have to really be when there is a functioning state that represents Yemen, that can be engaged with, and then that, the academic community and the global kind of coffee community can take it from there. It's not really something that I think we can talk to.
Well, that wraps up our questions. Thank you everyone for sending in those very thoughtful questions, and thanks to Qima, Lavazza, and Christoph, RDC Vision for being a part of this panel. And we will have the recording of this video available. It'll be on the Lavazza Patreon, and we'll also share it on YouTube. And then, yeah, just to follow up too, we have the last day to order sample sets for the Best of Yemen auction is this Friday, and the auction is August 9th if you would like to participate in that. And we will follow up with information on that as well, or you can check out our social channels, either Qima or Alliance for Coffee Excellence. And yeah, any final remarks from any of the panelists?
Just gratitude and thanks for everyone joining, and for you guys joining us in the call.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Let's continue to support Yemeni coffee.
I agree.
Yes, yes. Yeah,
Thank you very much,
definitely.
everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Okay.
Grazie mille. Bye.
Si,
Bye.
merci beaucoup.
Shukran.